One thing that you might want to do with your project is bring other sources into it. And Illustrator is a really good thing to pair with After Effects. And I'll show you a couple ways that you can do it that might be good for your workflow. So I'm going to open up my demo from the other day first in After Effects. And so in After Effects, we have a lot of the same tools that we have in Illustrator. Like you can make shapes, you can draw with a pen, you can make text, you can draw with a paintbrush. But there's a lot more stuff that you can do in Illustrator than you can in After Effects. You might be more comfortable designing something in Illustrator. So there's a couple ways that you can bring something into After Effects from Illustrator. And I'll go over both of them because they have some advantages and disadvantages. So I'm gonna go back to the Finder and I'm gonna grab my Illustrator project and open it. So I made this self-portrait. It's pretty bad, but that's okay. I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna make a copy and paste it into here because I'm gonna make some changes and I wanna make sure it's in the same place as my animation. So I just copied this self-portrait3.ai and pasted it in here. So I have 2 copies. And so if I open this up, so if you wanted to design something in Illustrator, you have more tools in Illustrator and it's easier to make things look good. I have some stuff in here that looks kind of bad. I'm gonna just delete this text. But other than that, I'll just leave it as is. One thing that I want to make sure to do is I didn't actually do a very good job of naming my layers. This layer I'm not using, so I'm just going to delete it. So I have self, clouds, layer 4. I don't know what that is. Oh, that's like the mountain top. Layer 7 is like the moon. Layer 1 is the background. And I don't need the guide, so I'm just going to hide those. Okay, so I want to make sure that I have actually good names for my layers before I import it into After Effects. Okay, so I've got that here, and so I'm going to go back to After Effects. And so there's 2 ways that I can import this Illustrator file into my After Effects project. So one way is just to add it as footage. So I can go to Import and import a file. I can also just hit Command-I, or I can drag it in. So if I have my Finder open, I can just drag Self-Portrait 3 in here. And so when you add it in, however you import it, it's going to ask you how you want to import it. So I can import it as footage. And the advantage of footage is that it's just one layer, but it will change if I update my, my original illustration. The advantage of the composition is it actually breaks your layers into each individual layer so you can animate them separately. So let's look at footage first. I'm going to say OK. So I get this AI file. It still looks like an AI file because it's still a reference to that original AI file. So I'm going to put it in my source folder. And then I'm just going to drag it into my composition. It doesn't really fit the size of the composition. So I probably would want to make some changes. I guess I could stretch it out like that. I would probably want to make some changes to my Illustrator or to my composition for this to work, but this is just to kind of show how I could use this. So maybe I would move it down here like that. So I could have it in the background, and it kind of frames the happy text nicely. So the advantage here, this is just like one file, right? So I can't actually go in and like edit each individual part, but it's still connected to my Illustrator file. So let's say I want to change something in the Illustrator file. If I go back to Illustrator, let's say I want to change my self-portrait. So I'm going to select all of those lines. And let's say I want to change the color. Maybe I'll make it blue. And maybe I want to make the stroke weight bigger. So I made a couple changes. Doesn't really matter what they are for this demonstration. So I made the changes in Illustrator. When I go back to After Effects, the changes are already there. So I can make changes to my Illustrator file, and it'll be imported into the After Effects file as long as these are still connected. So that's if I do it as footage. Okay, so the other way that I can add it in is as a composition. So I'm going to leave this here, and I'm going to drag it in again. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to drag this guy over here and go into compositions. So now if I do a composition, it's going to import all of my layers. So I'll stick with layer size and hit OK. And you can see it made this folder of all my layers. And if I go to this composition now, you can see all of my layers in the timeline. So now with this style, with this approach, I can actually animate individual components. So let's say I want to take the moon and do some animation. I can grab that, maybe rotate it around. So I can rotate, I can animate my individual components. So I could just make a little animation, and I can, I could take my little guy. He's on his own layer, so I could move him over here and keyframe the position, and then move him across. So I can animate the individual layers separately. So this might be a good way to work if you want to make stuff in Illustrator to make things with like more interesting, you can use all the transformations in Illustrator, you can use the pen tool, you can use the different shape tools and stuff like that, and then bring it into After Effects, and you can animate either the whole thing or you can animate individual components of your illustration. So it's a little bit more of a complex way to work. It's not required for the assignment, but I think it's pretty useful, so I wanted to just quickly go over that. All right, any questions on that? All right, so let's go over exporting. That's the last bit that we're going to do. So I'm going to go back to my main composition, and I'll just leave it as is. It's not really finished, but I want to export it and see how it looks. Maybe share it with people and get some feedback. So I'm just going to export what I've got so far. So I'm going to save it. So when we export an animation, we have to render it out. So what it's doing is it's rendering each frame of the animation, and then it's turning it into a video file. Our composition is pretty short, and there's not a lot going on. It's not very complex, so it shouldn't take long to render. But if you have like a really big animation, sometimes rendering can take like hours. So if I want to render this out, I can click on my composition. Oh, it doesn't have it. Okay, let's go to render. So I need to add to render queue. Oh, okay, it's in the composition here. I don't know why I can't get it here. Okay, whatever. So I have to click on the composition I want to render, go to composition, add to render queue. That's going to bring up this new window, the render queue. This is where, the reason you have a render queue is because if you're going to leave something rendering for like 6 hours, you might want to render a few different things. Ours isn't going to take that long because it's just a short file, but we have our main composition on our render queue. I have some render settings here. So let's make this bigger so we can see these. So if we click on this, we can change the render settings. We want to, so we can change the quality, resolution, size. All of this stuff is fine. So I'm just going to hit OK. Then we can change the output module. And so this is where we can change the format. So this is like our JPEG versus PNG. So QuickTime format is an Apple format. It's going to be a higher quality video, and it's going to be higher file size. So we'll do that first. The other format that we can do, I don't see on here, so we'll look at that in a second. The other one that we want is H.264, which I don't see here. Okay, we'll find that in a second. Okay, all of this stuff can stay the same. We don't have any audio, so we can just turn that off. That'll save us a little bit of render time. And then finally, the last thing that we have to set is the output. This is where the file is actually going to go. So that brings up our file dialog. So if it looks like this, hopefully it's where your animation is. If it's not, you can just find the animation folder. And so it's just going to be main.mov. And we can click save. And then we can click render. And there it goes. It shouldn't take too long. So it's going to take 30 more seconds. So the MOV file, you could, if that would be like your high quality file, if you were going to submit your animation to like a film festival or something like that, or screen it at a movie theater. For the internet, we want what's called an MP4 file, which is kind of like the video version of an MP3. It's lower file size, but also lower quality. So this is the MOV file. So if we open it up, we can see our animation. So you can see it's pretty high quality. You don't really see any like pixelation or banding. There's a little bit of banding in the Illustrator part because of that gradient, but overall it's pretty high quality. And it's going to be pretty big. It's 160 megabytes, so that's pretty large. You wouldn't be able to like email that to somebody. So let's get our MP4 file. So we did our render. Can I just redo this, or do I have to re-add it? Okay, let's re-add it. So I'm going to go to Composition, Add to Render Queue again. And so now we want to change the output. So for this format, I actually don't see MP4. So I'm not sure why that is. Maybe we have to change this to draft. QuickTime. I don't know why. It should just be there. We'll have to Google it. Okay. After Effects, export MP4. Oh, I guess there's a different, they've separated this out into media encoder. Okay, let's take a look at that. Add to media encoder queue. Okay, where's that? Huh, I guess they separated this out into a new program. Adobe is always changing these settings, so let's take a look. Hopefully this won't take too long. Okay, where's the Q? Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, so it looks like it's already set up. We don't need all of these, so I'm just going to remove them. I'm just hitting delete. Okay, so this is where this is now. We have the H.264, which is what we want. This one we don't really have to worry about, but match source is good. And then you can see it's going to export main.mp4. So this used to be part of After Effects. Now it looks like it's a separate program, but that's okay. It's not too bad. So the settings are exactly what we want. We don't have to change anything here. So I guess I hit play. See how long this takes. Dynamic link server. Jesus. Okay, so this isn't too bad. Okay, so here's our MP4. So this one is 13 megabytes. That's something that you could email to somebody. That's much smaller than the MOV file. Let's move this over here. We probably could get it even smaller than that if we did like a lower quality. Let's see if we can get it smaller. So let's try adaptive low bit rate, or let's do. Oh yeah, we could also make it. There's some like social media presets for like what you want if you want to put it on Twitter, or Vimeo, or YouTube. Let's do like a small Twitter one and see how that looks. So this is actually going to reduce the file size. So if you wanted to post something on social media, you wouldn't necessarily be concerned about it being the original resolution, because people aren't going to watch it at the original resolution. So you have all these different contexts for where your media will appear. This will be good for Discord too, because I think there's a limit to how much you can upload on Discord. Okay, so let's see. So this one is only 2.8 megabytes, and pretty much looks exactly the same. I'm sure if you like zoomed in close on it, you would see that there's some more pixelation. Yeah, you can kind of see the edges of the circle are kind of iffy. So some places where there's high contrast, it doesn't look great. But if you just wanted to post this on Twitter, that would be, you wouldn't, it wouldn't be noticeable. So let's see the difference if we can tell. There's the Twitter, that's the smallest one. It's 3 megabytes. Here's the MOV, this is the highest quality. So you can see the colors are sharper. There's a sharper edge, but other than that, you don't really notice it. And then the 12 megabyte MP4. Okay. So that's it. So once you have that, you can post it on Discord. We'll stop a little bit early to make sure everybody can do that today. You just drag it on here, hit enter, and then we can all enjoy each other's animation. So you don't have to be done yet, but whatever your progress is at the end of today, just take a minute to export it. You are going to have to do the MP4 because the MOV will be too big to share. So just remember that you have to go to composition and then add to Adobe Media Encoder queue. And I think it took a while because I didn't actually have that program open yet, which is why it seemed like it wasn't working. But if you have that program open or just wait for it to open, I think that's all you really need to do. And then once you're there, I think you can stick with the default settings, but you might want to choose, like Twitter is a good setting. One of these smaller file size, like the YouTube ones are probably good too. You could try different ones. All right, I'm going to stop recording.